Welcome back. We spent tonight digging into one of the most controversial investigations in recent memory, the Epstein case, and the way it exposed tension between public expectation, legal process, and institutional trust. And while the story remains active, another quietly unfolding development deserves our attention. The Supreme Court's use of emergency rulings, particularly in politically sensitive cases involving President Trump, because he is coming out the winner on all of these injunctions and immediate policies that are being tested. There is no conspiracy here. Let me reiterate, there is no conspiracy, but there is a pattern of decisions made quietly with limited explanation at moments that shape the political and legal landscape in real time. So let's talk about what that means, what it doesn't, and why it matters now more than ever. What is the emergency docket? The so-called shadow docket. It isn't a backroom shortcut. It is a legally valid process the Supreme Court uses to handle urgent matters before full review is possible. That can include death penalty stays, emergency injunctions, or procedural questions in high-profile disputes. And we have been witnessing a lot of high-profile disputes. These rulings often come quickly, sometimes without oral argument or full written opinions. And here's the key point. These are not final decisions. They're interim rulings intended to maintain order, not render judgment. The challenge to the public, these rulings often feel cryptic. No clear reasoning, no timeline, and often no certainty about what comes next. And also when it's just dealing with, like, say, procedural aspects or on emergency basis to determine whether a lower court overstepped its jurisdiction or its authority, which it has been found, it doesn't mean that it's a done deal. It means that they're pushing it. You still have the constitutional issues. You still have whatever the arguments are going through the appellate process. But one of the things is for sure is that it may take years before a case gets before the U.S. Supreme Court for full hearings, for full oral arguments. And to some, the damage may have been done, or it seems like what they're fighting against or for is already been stated. So when the court doesn't announce whether it will take a certain case or delays a decision on a pressing constitutional question, it leaves the public guessing. And guesswork in politically charged cases fuels distrust. And let's face it, we've seen that left and right. It's been happening since really 2020, if not before. So to be fair, the judges aren't dodging accountability. The court often waits for lower courts to fully develop the legal record before stepping in. That's how our system is designed. We have a hierarchy of court, the lower court, the appellate court, then the Supreme Court. But as we just saw with the Epstein controversy, where the DOJ said there's nothing more to see while victims and citizens still had questions, procedural correctness doesn't always satisfy public concern. And the Supreme Court, like any other institution, doesn't operate in a vacuum. Their silence, even when lawful, carries weight. And the public has a right to expect transparency, not immediate answers, but clear process. We can respect judicial independence while still asking for clarity. We can support the rule of law while acknowledging when it feels distant or opaque. Here's where we're landing tonight. Just like the Epstein investigation, the legal battles and the broader constitutional questions relating to all of these executive orders that Trump has been initiating and the changes with the destruction of the Department of Education or ICE's ability to deport individuals to other countries other than their home country are far from over. Again, these are emergency immediate powers. And this is nothing new. It's not something new here in this administration. That it occurred in the Biden administration. It was occurring, like, say, for instance, in the Biden administration with the student loan forgiveness. It is just a continuous fight. Emergency docket decisions are procedural bookmarks. They do not close the door on the issues. They set the stage for what's next. The real fights will play out in the circuit courts with the appellate courts chiming in, whether it's a partial, then the full appellate court, then full Supreme Court arguments. In public forums where legal pressure, public opinion, and constitutional precedent all intersect. So if you're watching the headlines and wondering, is that it? The answer is no. The judicial system moves slowly, but it does move. And as citizens, it is our job to stay informed, not inflamed. It is too easy, especially in a digital age that we're in, where we are connected 24/7, where we are seeing people, influencers on our phones constantly and going to other sources that may not be as fact-checked as it should be. We need to look into this. Transparency matters, process matters, and trust must be earned. And it doesn't help, and I will call myself out this too, that the media only likes to focus on what are the hot button issues that the Supreme Court has dealt with, rather than looking at or reporting about everything. Because the reality is as much as we like to say, oh, this is the Republican court and the left, no. Yes, we have a liberal justice and we have more conservative justices, and we have some that are somewhat in the between. And we've seen that. And what needs to be stated is, for the vast majority of those cases brought before the United States Supreme Court, there is consensus, more often unanimously than not. It's just that the more politicized court hearings, like the overturning of Roe v. Wade, that's what gets our attention. And I think that this is also harkens back to, look at the conspiracies. I mean, we can go back and into history. But one thing is for certain, there has to be some type of accountability, but there also has to be transparency. The Supreme Court the United States Supreme Court is not known to be out there and as vocal or as, let's say, camera forward, if you will. But maybe it needs to. Maybe there needs to be some type of educational form to explain these things. Because now, especially in the digital age, especially now that we have great search engines and people are more willing to look up and go down rabbit holes and think, maybe they need to be more transparent as to their processes so it can be better explained, so it can be education. The public needs to be more educated on this. We haven't heard the last of the constitutionality of birthright citizenship. We haven't heard the last of the immigration reforms that are done by the pen. And I'm not talking about auto pen or pen. And one thing is for certain, what we're seeing, which we're constantly being harangued with, is what is happening is that we're seeing these fast moving cases that are going from federal circuit court to the U.S. Supreme Court to determine whether an injunction can be nationwide, or whether until such time as the full hearing, the full trial process on the constitutionality of dismantling the Department of Education can be heard and dealt with but if it goes to whether or not Trump can move forward with his plans to dismantle it, that was dealt with just now. And also recall that we can't just work on hypotheticals. The court isn't there to say if, rule on something that hypothetically may occur. It just can't do that. As we, the people, we believe in facts over fear and law over noise. And drowning out the noise seems to be getting a little bit more difficult each and every day. So, whether we're talking about sealed records, emergency rulings, or political fallout, one truth remains: transparency matters, process matters, and trust must be earned. We'll continue to follow these cases and help you make sense of what the institutions won't always explain. Or maybe we should start demanding that the institutions, bureaucratic, judicial, congressional, and executive branches actually be more transparent, or at least start putting forth, this is the procedures, these are the policies, this is how we deal with them. Love what you're watching? Catch every episode of We the People on Now Media TV, live or on demand. Download the free Roku app and access bold bilingual news and commentary 24/7. We the People will return right after this.